They controlled the richest trade routes in history, yet most died broke and forgotten. Why? Hey guys, tonight we're sailing the treacherous waters of medieval commerce with the Byzantine merchants who built fortunes on silk and spices, only to watch pirates, wars, and rivals tear everything away. Picture yourself standing on the marble docks of Constantinople at dawn, salt spray mixing with the scent of cinnamon and frankincense, while ships from 3 continents unload treasures that could buy entire villages. The golden dome of Hagia Sophia catches the morning light behind you, but your eyes are fixed on the horizon where both opportunity and death sail toward you on the same tide. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. I love seeing our global bedtime community come together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at the Misi, Constantinople's main commercial avenue, where the air thrums with a dozen languages and the clink of coins from every corner of the known world. This is 1180 AD, and you're witnessing the zenith of Byzantine commercial power, the moment when Constantinople truly earned its nickname as the Queen of Cities. The city controls the only sea route between Europe and Asia, making every merchant who wants to trade between East and West pay tribute to the Byzantine coffers. Your leather boots echo on stones worn smooth by centuries of traders, pilgrims, and diplomats who've walked this same path seeking fortune. The great palace looms to your south, its golden walls reflecting the morning sun like a beacon visible from miles out at sea. Emperor Manuel I Comnenos has just signed another trade agreement with Venice, though you suspect, like every other Byzantine merchant, that this deal will favor the Italians more than your own people. The Venetians have been playing a long game, securing trading privileges that bypass Byzantine taxes while undercutting local merchants. It's economic warfare disguised as diplomacy, and you're caught in the crossfire. Your merchants catalogs the wealth flowing through the city's arteries. Silk from China rustles past in carefully guarded caravans, each bolt worth more than a farmer's annual income. Indian spices fill the air with exotic fragrances that make your mouth water and your purse feel lighter just thinking about the markup. Byzantine craftsmen work gold and silver into jewelry so intricate that Arab poets will write verses about its beauty. The city's strategic position means that luxury goods from the Far East must pass through your hands before reaching the eager markets of Western Europe. But this golden age comes with a price written in blood and treachery. You've heard the whispers in the merchant quarter about ships that never returned from Alexandria, their hulls split open by Saracen pirates who know exactly which vessels carry the most valuable cargo. Someone's been selling information, and the list of potential traders includes your own business partners. Trust is a luxury you can't afford when a single betrayed shipping route could bankrupt 3 generations of your family. The Silk Road caravan routes that feed Constantinople's wealth are increasingly dangerous. Seljuk Turks control much of Anatolia now, demanding tribute from merchants who once traveled freely under Byzantine protection. Each expedition requires careful negotiation, hefty bribes, and armed escorts who might rob you themselves if the price is right. Historians still argue whether the rise of Turkish power was inevitable or whether Byzantine diplomatic failures accelerated their own commercial decline. But standing here in the golden morning light, such academic debates feel distant. You notice a peculiar sight that perfectly captures the precarious nature of Byzantine commerce. A merchant arguing with a customs official over a shipment of what appears to be ordinary pottery. But you know better. Those ceramic vessels are packed with Chinese silk disguised to avoid the punitive taxes that Venice has somehow managed to exempt themselves from. It's smuggling, technically, but everyone does it. The alternative is watching Italian competitors undercut your prices while operating under legal protections your own government won't extend to its citizens. The morning call to prayer echoes from nearby mosques. a reminder that Constantinople hosts every faith known to the civilized world. Muslim merchants trade alongside Christians. Jews handle banking that canon law forbids to Christians, and Armenian craftsmen create goods that everyone claims as their own cultural heritage. This religious diversity is both strength and weakness. It enables commerce, but also creates endless opportunities for rivals to exploit ethnic and religious tensions for commercial advantage. Your stomach growls, reminding you that even successful merchants must eat, though your breakfast of bread and olive oil seems humble compared to the exotic delicacies passing through your city. The irony isn't lost on you. Constantinople imports the finest foods in the world, yet most of its residents survive on simple fare while foreign traders enjoy the luxury goods they're shipping elsewhere. It's like working in a candy factory while being forbidden to taste the chocolate. The captain's weathered hands trace the hull of each vessel like a doctor examining patients. Because in the cutthroat world of Byzantine commerce, your choice of ship determines whether you'll return home rich or feed the fishes. You stand in the imperial harbor of Constantinople, surrounded by the greatest variety of vessels ever assembled in one port, each designed for different types of survival in an increasingly dangerous Mediterranean. The morning mist clings to the water, making the forest of mass look like a ghostly army prepared for battle, which in many ways they are. Byzantine dramens bob alongside your potential choices, their bronze-reinforced prows gleaming like weapons in the early light. These military vessels occasionally moonlight as merchant ships, but their primary design screams warship to any pirate foolish enough to approach. The dramen's secret weapon isn't just its speed, it's the fear factor. Pirates prefer easy targets, and nothing says difficult target like a ship that could ram you, set you on fire with Greek fire, and outrun your escape vessel all in the same afternoon. But dramens are expensive to charter, and their military crews demand premium wages, cutting deep into profit margins that are already razor thin. The round ships offer a completely different survival strategy: capacity over speed, endurance over elegance. These broad-beamed vessels can carry 3 times the cargo of a galley, making them irresistible to merchants who think in terms of volume and profit per voyage. You run your hand along the thick oak planking, appreciating the craftsmanship that goes into building a ship designed to survive Mediterranean storms that can appear from nowhere and sink vessels in minutes. The round ship's deep draft and heavy construction mean it won't outrun determined pirates, but it might survive weather that would scatter pursuing vessels to the 4 winds. A Genoese merchant nearby is inspecting a hybrid vessel, part galley, part round ship, that represents the latest thinking in commercial ship design. These compromised vessels attempt to balance speed and cargo capacity, though critics argue they excel at neither. Historians still argue whether these hybrid designs represented innovation or desperation, but you're more concerned with practical matters like whether the ship's reinforced hull can survive a ramming attack, or whether its sail configuration will perform in the variable winds of the Aegean Sea. The ship selection process reveals the brutal mathematics of medieval commerce. Fast ships arrive first at distant ports, commanding premium prices for their cargo before slower competitors arrive to flood the market. But fast ships carry less cargo, requiring higher markup per item to justify the voyage. Slow ships maximize volume, but risk arriving after market demand has been satisfied by earlier vessels. It's a gambler's choice disguised as a business decision, and you've seen fortunes made and lost based on nothing more than favorable winds or the lack thereof. Your experienced eye notices details that separate seaworthy vessels from floating coffins. The quality of rope and sailcloth indicates whether the ship's owner invests in maintenance or cuts corners that could prove fatal in storms. Iron fittings show less corrosion than bronze ones, but they're more expensive and harder to replace in foreign ports. The condition of the anchor tells you whether the captain has experience in difficult harbors or just talks a good game while drunk in waterfront taverns. A fascinating piece of maritime archaeology involves the ship's cat, not a pet, but an essential crew member whose job involves controlling the rat population that could otherwise destroy cargo and spread disease. You've learned to judge a ship's management by observing whether the cat looks well-fed and content. A nervous, thin cat suggests either poor pest control or a crew that doesn't understand the economics of preventive maintenance. It's a quirky detail, but experienced merchants know that small indicators often reveal larger truths about reliability and competence. The harbor master approaches with his ledger, ready to collect port fees that seem to increase every month as the empire's financial situation deteriorates. Each type of vessel pays different rates based on size, cargo capacity, and intended destination. Warships pay reduced fees, supposedly in recognition of their role in protecting commercial traffic, though you suspect the real reason involves political connections and military intimidation. The fee structure creates perverse incentives that encourage merchants to choose vessels based on tax advantages rather than practical suitability for their specific trading mission. Weather patterns add another layer of complexity to ship selection. The summer trading season offers predictable winds, but also peak piracy activity, as raiders know exactly when merchant fleets will be crossing their hunting grounds. Spring and autumn voyages face unpredictable storms, but encounter fewer pirates, since most raiders prefer to avoid the same dangerous weather that threatens merchant vessels. Winter sailing is officially discouraged, but not forbidden, creating opportunities for merchants brave or desperate enough to risk everything on off-season trading runs when successful voyages can command extraordinary prices. Your final consideration involves the human element, the captain and crew whose competence will determine your fate more than any technical specification. A skilled captain with an experienced crew can nurse a mediocre ship through conditions that would destroy a superior vessel with inferior seamanship. You've learned to ask subtle questions about the crew's experience with your intended route, their familiarity with local customs officials, and their reputation among other merchants who've sailed with them previously. The decision crystallizes as you watch a sleek galley prepare for departure, its crew moving with the synchronized efficiency of men who've sailed together for years. Speed, maneuverability, and experienced seamanship trump raw cargo capacity when your life and fortune depend on reaching your destination alive. Sometimes survival matters more than profit margins, and in the dangerous world of Byzantine commerce, dead merchants don't spend their earnings. The abacus beads click like nervous teeth as you calculate the precise weight, volume, and value of every item destined for your ship's hold, knowing that one miscalculation could transform a profitable voyage into financial catastrophe. Sweat beads on your forehead, despite the cool morning air in Constantinople's commercial district, because the mathematics of medieval commerce involve more variables than most scholars could manage, and every number represents a gamble with your family's future. Your ledger pages flutter in the harbor breeze, each line representing weeks of negotiation, bribery, and careful planning that could be undone by a single storm, pirate attack, or market shift. Silk occupies the premium space in your cargo calculations. Chinese silk that's traveled the length of the known world to reach Constantinople, where you'll mark it up again before shipping it to European markets hungry for luxury. Each bolt weighs precisely 4 pounds and measures exactly 32 yards, making it perfect for the mathematical precision required in international trade. The silk's value per pound exceeds that of gold, but it's also fragile, susceptible to water damage, and attractive to thieves who know they can easily conceal and transport stolen goods. You allocate the most secure, waterproof section of your ship's hold for silk, even though this premium cargo space could hold 3 times as much wheat or olive oil. Spices present an entirely different calculation challenge. Pepper from India costs 12 times its weight in silver at Constantinople's wholesale markets, but European consumers will pay 30 times silver weight in Paris or London. The profit margins seem astronomical until you factor in spoilage, theft, customs duties, and the mortality rate among merchants who attempt these high-value trading runs. Black pepper keeps well in properly sealed containers, But cinnamon bark deteriorates rapidly in humid conditions, and saffron, worth more than its weight in gold, requires almost surgical precision in handling and storage. Your most intriguing cargo category involves what you euphemistically call special items, goods that require discretion rather than documentation. Byzantine craftsmen produce mechanical clocks so advanced that Arab scholars travel hundreds of miles just to observe their operation. But exporting this technology violates imperial regulations designed to maintain technological superiority. The profit margins on smuggled technology make spice trading look conservative, but the penalties for getting caught involve more than financial loss. Still, you've heard rumors of merchants who've retired wealthy after just 3 successful runs of special items to Baghdad or Cairo. The weight calculations become critical when you consider your ship's limitations. Every pound of high-value cargo means 1 less pound of bulk goods that could provide steady, reliable profits. Wheat from Egyptian farms sells reliably in Constantinople's markets, but the profit margins barely cover transportation costs unless you can move large volumes. Wine from Greek islands commands premium prices in barbarian territories where local brewing produces beverages that taste like punishment, but wine's weight and volume make it impractical for long-distance trading unless you're confident about market demand. Regional specialties offer opportunities for merchants who understand local preferences and seasonal variations. Amber from the Baltic reaches Constantinople through a complex chain of intermediaries, each adding markup that should make the final price prohibitive. Yet wealthy Romans prize amber jewelry so highly that you can sell Baltic amber for 10 times what you paid, assuming you can establish reliable supply chains and avoid the numerous middlemen who'd love to eliminate your profit margin by dealing directly with your sources. Your calculations must account for what economists would later call opportunity costs, though you think of it as the price of choices not made. Space devoted to silk can't carry spices. Time spent negotiating pepper prices prevents you from exploring amber markets. And relationships with Chinese suppliers might conflict with partnerships involving their competitors. Every cargo decision closes other opportunities, creating a complex web of interconnected choices that determines not just this voyage's profitability, but your long-term commercial viability. Historians still argue whether Byzantine merchants truly understood compound interest and risk assessment, but your daily experience suggests that successful traders intuitively grasp concepts that wouldn't be formally articulated for centuries. You calculate not just immediate profits, but the cumulative effects of successful trading relationships, the long-term costs of reputation damage, and the probability-weighted returns of high-risk, high-reward ventures versus steady, predictable income streams. The human cargo presents ethical dilemmas disguised as business decisions. Slaves are legal, profitable, and in constant demand throughout the Mediterranean world, but they're also dangerous to transport, morally questionable, and increasingly risky as religious authorities debate the compatibility of slave trading with Christian principles. You've avoided the slave trade so far, but competitors who engage in human trafficking often undercut your prices by using slave labor to reduce operating costs. It's a reminder that commerce and morality don't always align neatly. Your final calculations involve what you privately call disaster insurance. Reserve capital set aside for bribes, emergency repairs, unexpected duties, and the countless small crises that could destroy a trading voyage. Conservative merchants allocate 20% of their capital for contingencies, while aggressive traders risk everything on maximum cargo loads. Your experience suggests that merchants who don't plan for disasters inevitably encounter them, while those who prepare for every possible catastrophe sometimes miss opportunities that require quick decisions and full commitment. The completed cargo manifest reads like a prayer disguised as an inventory. Silk and spices and secrets, each item carefully weighed against alternatives, each choice representing hours of calculation and years of experience. Your signature at the bottom commits you to a course of action that will determine whether your family eats well next winter or joins the ranks of failed merchants who trusted their fortunes to mathematics and fate. The Mediterranean stretches before you like a beautiful trap, its azure waters concealing the most efficient maritime predators in human history. Saracen pirates who've transformed ship hunting into a precise science that would make modern military strategists weep with envy. Your merchant vessel cuts through swells that have carried traders for millennia. But today, those same waters host raiders whose knowledge of winds, currents, and merchant sailing patterns rivals that of any admiral in the Byzantine Navy. The irony burns like salt spray in your eyes. The same sea routes that built Constantinople's wealth now serve as hunting grounds for enemies who've learned to use Byzantine commercial success against itself. Saracen pirate tactics represent evolution in action. Generations of raiders refining their methods until ship hunting became as predictable as farming, with seasonal patterns, preferred hunting grounds, and specialized techniques for different types of prey. These aren't desperate criminals attacking random targets. They're professional maritime predators who maintain detailed intelligence networks, plan operations months in advance, and operate with military discipline that puts most legitimate navies to shame. Your scouts report pirate bases scattered across North African coasts, each equipped with fast ships, experienced crews, and detailed knowledge of Byzantine merchant sailing schedules. The speed differential between pirate vessels and merchant ships creates an almost insurmountable tactical disadvantage. Pirate galleys sacrifice cargo capacity for pure speed and maneuverability, while your vessel prioritizes cargo space over performance. In practical terms, this means pirates can choose when and where to engage, while merchants can only hope to avoid detection or reach sanctuary before being overtaken. It's like being hunted by wolves while riding a heavily loaded cart. You might survive through luck or careful planning, but you'll never outrun determined pursuers in open terrain. Your captain explains the mathematics of pirate economics with grim precision. A successful pirate crew can earn more from capturing one well-loaded merchant vessel than most craftsmen make in 5 years of honest labor. The risk-reward ratio heavily favors piracy, especially since Mediterranean governments lack the resources to patrol every trade route effectively. Pirates face minimal legal consequences if they avoid attacking vessels from powerful nations, and they can often sell stolen goods in markets that ask no inconvenient questions about provenance. The psychological warfare begins before any ships appear on the horizon. Rumors circulate constantly about pirate activities, some true, many exaggerated, all designed to create an atmosphere of fear that affects merchant behavior in ways that benefit pirates. Merchants who hear stories about massive pirate fleets may choose safer but longer routes, creating predictable traffic patterns that make interception easier. Others might travel in convoy, which provides mutual defense but also creates larger, more visible targets that attract attention from greater distances. Pirate intelligence networks rival those of major governments, with informants in every major port reporting on cargo manifests, sailing schedules, and crew capabilities. You suspect that someone in Constantinople's merchant quarter sells information to Saracen raiders, because pirate attacks show suspicious timing and knowledge of specific vessels' cargo values. The informant could be anyone, a dock worker, customs official, or even a competing merchant who profits from your misfortune. Paranoia becomes a survival skill when betrayal can be purchased for the price of a good meal. The religious dimension adds complexity to what might otherwise be simple criminal activity. Many Saracen pirates justify their attacks as jihad against Christian merchants, transforming piracy into a holy war that carries spiritual rewards alongside material profits. This religious motivation makes negotiation difficult and surrender dangerous, since pirates motivated by faith may be less interested in ransom and more committed to total destruction of their enemies. Christian merchants face the additional challenge of operating in a political environment where their own governments may prioritize military campaigns over commercial protection. Historians still argue whether Saracen piracy represented organized state activity or independent criminal enterprise. But the distinction matters little to merchants whose ships are burning on the horizon. Some pirate fleets operate with tacit government support, using bases in territories controlled by Muslim rulers who collect taxes on pirate profits. Others work independently, which makes them harder to track, but also less predictable in their methods and territorial ranges. Your defensive options are limited and expensive. Hiring armed escorts doubles your voyage costs, while providing no guarantee of protection against determined attackers. Traveling in convoy offers mutual defense, but requires coordination with other merchants who may have competing interests or different risk tolerances. Choosing alternate routes avoids known pirate hunting grounds, but adds weeks to journey times and often involves additional port fees in unfamiliar harbors. The most sophisticated pirate operations involve multiple coordinated vessels that can surround merchant ships and attack from several directions simultaneously. These fleet actions require communication systems, supply bases, and command structures that rival legitimate naval operations. Capture merchants report seeing pirate fleets with standardized equipment, uniform tactics, and discipline that suggests formal military training rather than improvised criminal activity. Weather becomes your most reliable ally against pirate attacks, since storms that threaten merchant vessels pose even greater dangers to the lighter, less seaworthy craft preferred by pirates. You've learned to read weather signs not just for navigation safety, but as potential escape routes when pursued. An approaching storm that might normally send you seeking harbor becomes a tactical opportunity to shake pursuit, assuming your vessel can survive conditions that will scatter or sink smaller pirate craft. The capture merchant's fate depends on cargo value, crew usefulness, and pure chance. Wealthy merchants might be ransomed, skilled sailors could be pressed into pirate service, and valuable cargo will be sold in markets that specialize in stolen goods. But many captured merchants simply disappear, their ships scuttled and crews thrown overboard to eliminate witnesses. The uncertainty creates psychological pressure that affects decision-making long before any pirates appear on the horizon. The wind shifts without warning, and suddenly your carefully planned voyage becomes a desperate race against weather that could destroy months of investment in the time it takes to say a final prayer. Mediterranean storms don't announce themselves with the courtesy of gradual deterioration. They explode into existence like divine wrath made manifest, transforming calm seas into mountainous walls of water that can crush even the sturdiest merchant vessel into floating kindling. Your captain's weathered face goes pale as he reads the signs that landlubbers miss. The subtle color change in distant clouds, the way seabirds alter their flight patterns, and the almost imperceptible shift in wave rhythm that signals the approach of nature's most violent mood. The Mediterranean's reputation for sudden, devastating storms is well earned through centuries of shattered ships and drowned merchants who trusted their fortunes to what seemed like perfect sailing weather. Unlike the Atlantic's predictable seasonal patterns, Mediterranean weather systems can spawn killer storms in any season, often with less than an hour's warning between first signs and life-threatening conditions. Your ship carries enough supplies for a planned 3-week voyage, but storms can extend journey times indefinitely while consuming provisions at an accelerated rate as crew members work desperately to keep the vessel afloat. Greek fire becomes a terrifying liability when storms threaten your ship, since the secret incendiary compound that makes Byzantine naval warfare so effective can turn your own vessel into a floating funeral pyre if containers break or leak during violent weather. You've heard stories of merchant ships that survived storms only to burn to the waterline when Greek fire ignited from the friction of cargo shifting in heavy seas. The decision to carry such dangerous but valuable cargo requires calculating not just profit margins, but the probability of accidental self-destruction during routine weather events. Your crew's experience with storm survival determines whether violent weather represents a manageable inconvenience or a death sentence for everyone aboard. Veteran sailors know which sails to drop first, how to redistribute cargo weight to maintain stability, and when to throw valuable goods overboard to prevent the ship from foundering. Inexperienced crews panic during their first major storm, making critical errors that transform survivable conditions into fatal disasters. The quality of your crew matters more than the quality of your ship when waves tower higher than cathedral spires and winds howl like demons. Navigation becomes pure guesswork when storms eliminate all visual references and render traditional instruments useless. Your navigator normally relies on celestial observations, coastal landmarks, and dead reckoning calculations that require stable conditions and clear visibility. Storm clouds block stars, rain obscures coastlines, and violent ship motion makes mathematical calculations impossible. Many merchant vessels have sailed confidently into storms only to emerge days later with no reliable knowledge of their position, sometimes hundreds of miles off course with dangerously depleted supplies. The psychology of storm survival reveals character traits that normal circumstances conceal, as the proximity of death strips away social pretenses and reveals who can function under extreme stress. Some merchants become paralyzed by fear, unable to make decisions when quick thinking could save everyone aboard. Others discover reserves of courage and leadership they never knew they possessed, taking command when official authority figures prove inadequate to the crisis. The storm becomes a crucible that transforms ordinary commercial relationships into bonds forged by shared survival. Ancient weather folklore contains surprising accuracy mixed with superstitious nonsense, creating a challenging puzzle for merchants who must distinguish between useful traditional knowledge and dangerous mythology. Experienced sailors swear by weather signs that prove remarkably reliable. The behavior of dolphins, the color of sunset clouds, and the feel of wind on exposed skin can provide earlier warning than any formal meteorological instrument. But the same traditions include rituals and taboos that waste precious time during critical moments when practical action determines survival. Religious faith becomes intensely practical during life-threatening storms, as merchants who rarely pray discover sudden devotion when their lives depend on divine intervention. You've watched hardened atheists bargain desperately with God during violent weather, promising charitable donations, pilgrimage journeys, and moral reformation in exchange for safe passage. Historians still argue whether religious observance actually improves survival rates or simply provides psychological comfort during traumatic experiences, but few merchants question the value of prayer when waves crash over their vessel's deck. The economic impact of storm delays extends far beyond immediate survival concerns, creating cascading financial consequences that could destroy carefully planned commercial operations. Cargo that arrives late to seasonal markets may sell for a fraction of expected prices. Loan payments become impossible to meet when trading schedules collapse, and reputation damage from unreliable delivery can eliminate future business opportunities. A storm that delays your voyage by 2 weeks might create financial losses that take years to recover, assuming you survive to make the attempt. Emergency equipment represents a constant tension between prudent preparation and cargo space optimization, since every item devoted to storm survival reduces capacity for profitable goods. Spare sails, extra rope, emergency food supplies, and repair materials could save your life during a severe storm, but they also reduce the cargo space that generates revenue. Conservative merchants carry extensive emergency supplies and accept lower profits, while aggressive traders maximize cargo loads and gamble that good weather will hold throughout their voyage. Storm damage creates opportunities for maritime entrepreneurs who specialize in emergency repairs and salvage operations, though their services come at prices that reflect desperate circumstances rather than fair market rates. A merchant whose ship limps in a port after storm damage faces suppliers who know exactly how desperate the situation has become. Emergency repairs might cost more than the original vessel purchase price, but the alternative is often total loss of ship and cargo. The aftermath of surviving a major storm creates a peculiar emotional state that combines relief, exhaustion, and renewed appreciation for simple pleasures like solid ground beneath your feet. Merchants who survive severe weather often describe the experience as transformative, providing perspective on life's priorities that changes their approach to risk and reward. Some become more conservative, unwilling to gamble with nature after seeing its destructive power firsthand. Others develop an almost addictive attraction to high-stakes adventures, as if normal commercial activities become boring after experiencing ultimate survival challenges. The harbor master's smile never reaches his eyes as he examines your cargo manifest with the practiced scrutiny of a man who's perfected the art of legal extortion, and you know that the standard fees he's about to quote will bear no resemblance to any published rate schedule. His office reeks of stale wine and corruption, with ledgers that contain more creative fiction than most libraries, and you understand that every port in the Mediterranean operates according to the same unwritten rule. Official duties are merely the opening bid in a negotiation that determines whether your ship leaves harbor this month or next year. The parchment crackles in his fingers as he calculates not just what you owe, but how much additional payment your desperation might be worth. Port authority corruption has evolved into a sophisticated economic system that generates more revenue than legitimate customs duties, creating parallel bureaucracies where real power belongs to officials who never appear on organizational charts. Your experience in dozens of harbors has taught you to identify the key players within minutes of arrival. The customs inspector who handles documentation, the harbor master who controls berth assignments, the port captain who oversees loading operations, and the mysterious facilitator who can make problems disappear for the right price. Each official operates within carefully defined territories of influence, and attempting to bypass one by dealing directly with another can result in punitive delays that cost more than simply paying all of them. The mathematics of bribery follow economic principles that would fascinate scholars if anyone dared study them openly. Small bribes paid early prevent larger extortion demands later, but overpaying establishes you as a wealthy target for future shakedowns. Underpaying signals poverty or disrespect, either of which invites harassment that could destroy your commercial schedule. The optimal bribe amount varies by port, season, cargo value, and your perceived ability to pay, creating a complex calculation that requires both mathematical precision and psychological insight into human greed. Venetian merchants have systematized port corruption to their advantage, establishing standardized bribery rates and cultivating long-term relationships with key officials that provide competitive advantages over Byzantine traders. Their diplomatic immunities, secured through treaties that Byzantine negotiators foolishly signed, allow Venetians to bypass many fees that you must pay, creating an unfair playing field that grows worse each year. You've watched Venetian ships sail through customs inspections that would take weeks for Byzantine vessels, their captains exchanging friendly jokes with officials who treat you like a criminal suspect. Documentation fraud represents the most sophisticated aspect of port corruption, involving forged papers, altered cargo manifests, and phantom shipments that exist only in ledgers designed to confuse legitimate authorities. Some ports maintain two complete sets of records: official documentation for imperial inspectors and accurate records for internal use. Your cargo of Chinese silk might officially become textile samples of negligible value for customs purposes, while your spices transform into medicinal herbs for personal use. The fiction satisfies bureaucratic requirements while reducing tax liability, but it also creates legal vulnerabilities if authorities choose to enforce regulations selectively. Regional variations in corruption practices create additional complexity for merchants who trade across multiple territories. North African ports favor direct cash payments with minimal documentation, while Italian city-states prefer complex arrangements involving reciprocal favors and long-term obligations. Greek islands often accept payment in kind, allowing merchants to settle obligations with portions of their cargo rather than scarce currency. Eastern ports sometimes demand political intelligence or religious artifacts alongside monetary payments, reflecting the diverse motivations of corrupt officials. The timing of bribe payments affects their efficiency and your overall costs, since officials who feel properly respected early in the process may provide assistance that saves money later. Paying customs bribes before cargo inspection can influence the thoroughness of examination, while delaying payment until after problems arise often results in punitive fees that far exceed preventive bribes. Your experience suggests that corruption functions most efficiently when treated as a legitimate business expense rather than an unfortunate necessity. Competition among corrupt officials creates opportunities for savvy merchants who understand local power dynamics and can play different factions against each other. The customs inspector and harbor master may have overlapping authority that allows you to choose which official to approach first, potentially securing better terms by implying that alternatives exist. However, this strategy requires careful execution, since officials who feel bypassed or disrespected can retaliate with delays and harassment that cost more than simply paying their demands. Historians still argue whether widespread corruption in Byzantine ports reflected weak central authority or represented a rational response to unrealistic official tax rates. But merchants care more about practical survival than academic theories. Your daily experience suggests that corruption serves as an unofficial tax system that funds port operations when legitimate revenues prove inadequate. The bribes you pay often exceed official duties, but they also purchase services and expedited processing that wouldn't exist under a purely legal system. The psychology of corrupt officials reveals patterns that help predict their behavior and optimize their negotiation strategy. Officials who live modestly despite their positions may be saving for retirement or supporting extended families, making them more responsive to long-term relationship building than immediate payoffs. Those who display obvious wealth often have expensive habits that require regular cash flow, creating opportunities for merchants who can provide steady income streams rather than one-time payments. Currency selection for bribe payments involves considerations beyond simple exchange rates, since different coins carry varying degrees of acceptability and discretion. Gold Byzants are universally welcome, but attract attention that might compromise both parties, while silver coins provide adequate value with less conspicuous transactions. Local currencies demonstrate cultural sensitivity and reduce the need for money changing that creates additional records of financial transactions. Your reputation among port officials becomes a valuable commercial asset that requires careful cultivation and maintenance over multiple voyages. Officials who know you as a reliable source of appropriate payments may provide advance warning of policy changes, expedited processing during busy seasons, or assistance during emergencies that could otherwise destroy your commercial schedule. Building these relationships requires consistent behavior, appropriate generosity, and respect for the unwritten rules that govern corrupt transactions. The moral complexity of participating in corrupt systems creates internal conflict for merchants who would prefer honest dealing but recognize that idealistic behavior leads to commercial failure. You've rationalized your participation by noting that corruption exists with or without your involvement, and that your payments at least ensure efficient processing for your legitimate business activities. Still, the cumulative effect of countless small compromises weighs on your conscience, especially when you consider how much wealth flows from productive commerce into the pockets of parasitic officials. The Venetian merchant's smile carries the same warmth as a blade sliding between your ribs, and you recognize in his courteous greeting the calculated friendliness of a competitor who'd cheerfully bankrupt your family if it increased his profit margins by a single %. Trade wars fought with ledgers and contracts prove more devastating than military campaigns, leaving fewer corpses but more complete destruction. And you've learned that commercial rivalry in the medieval Mediterranean makes battlefield combat look straightforward and honorable by comparison. Your fellow merchants speak politely of healthy competition, but their eyes hold the cold calculation of predators evaluating prey, and every handshake feels like a temporary truce in an undeclared war for economic survival. Venetian trading privileges secured through treaties that Byzantine diplomats signed in moments of desperate military need have transformed fair competition into systematic exploitation that grows worse with each passing year. The Venetians pay reduced customs duties, enjoy legal protections that Byzantine merchants lack, and operate under commercial regulations that favor their interests over local traders. You watch Venetian galleys sail past customs inspections that would delay Byzantine vessels for weeks, their captains waving cheerfully at officials who treat your countrymen like potential criminals. The irony burns like acid. Your own empire grants foreign competitors advantages that its citizens can't access. Genoese merchants employ different but equally effective strategies, specializing in maritime insurance, banking services, and currency exchange that give them control over the financial infrastructure supporting Mediterranean commerce. They don't need special trading privileges because they've positioned themselves as indispensable intermediaries in transactions that other merchants must complete to stay in business. Your silk purchases require Genoese banking letters. Your insurance policies involve Genoese underwriters, and your currency exchanges enrich Genoese money changers who set rates that systematically favor their compatriots. Information warfare has become as important as cargo management in determining commercial success, with competing merchants maintaining spy networks that would impress government intelligence services. Your rivals know your cargo manifest before your ships clear harbor, understand your credit arrangements with suspicious accuracy, and somehow learn about promising new markets before you can exploit them yourself. The intelligence flows both ways, of course, and you've cultivated relationships with dock workers, customs officials, and tavern keepers who provide valuable information about competitor activities. Sabotage disguised as accident represents the darkest aspect of merchant rivalry, though proving deliberate interference requires evidence that victims rarely survive to present. Ships experience mysterious fires while loaded with competitor cargo. Warehouse break-ins target specific merchants while leaving others untouched, and food poisoning strikes crews just before important departures with suspicious frequency. You've learned to taste wine carefully in taverns frequented by business rivals, and your ship's guards include men whose primary job involves preventing accidents that might benefit competitors. Price manipulation tactics involve coordinated attacks on specific markets that can destroy smaller merchants who lack the capital reserves to survive temporary losses. Venetian trading companies sometimes flood markets with below-cost goods, accepting short-term losses to drive local competitors into bankruptcy before raising prices to monopolistic levels. The strategy requires substantial capital and perfect timing, but successful price wars can eliminate competition for years while generating enormous long-term profits for the survivors. Credit warfare proves especially effective against merchants who depend on borrowed capital to finance their operations, since rumors about financial instability can become self-fulfilling prophecies that destroy creditworthy businesses. Your Genoese competitors spread carefully crafted whispers about your debt obligations, shipping delays, and market difficulties that make lenders nervous about extending credit when you need it most. The irony is that their rumors often prove accurate because credit denial forces merchants into desperate decisions that confirm the original accusations. Marriage alliances between merchant families create commercial partnerships that transcend national boundaries while simultaneously excluding competitors from lucrative opportunities. Your Venetian rivals intermarry with Byzantine families who control key trading concessions, creating networks of mutual obligation that operate outside normal competitive frameworks. These family alliances can last for generations, passing commercial advantages from parents to children while maintaining barriers that prevent outsiders from accessing the same opportunities. Technological espionage involves stealing trade secrets, manufacturing processes, and navigation techniques that provide competitive advantages worth more than entire cargo shipments. Byzantine silk production methods are closely guarded state secrets, but Venetian agents continuously attempt to recruit craftsmen who might reveal critical details about dyeing processes, weaving techniques, or silkworm cultivation. Similarly, You've tried to discover the secrets behind Genoese banking innovations and Venetian shipbuilding advances that give your competitors systematic advantages. Legal warfare exploits differences between commercial codes, treaty provisions, and local regulations to create advantages that benefit one group of merchants while harming others. Venetian lawyers specialize in finding technical violations in Byzantine commercial practices, then using these discoveries to demand compensation, preferential treatment, or regulatory changes that benefit their clients. The legal system becomes a weapon that transforms minor procedural errors into major commercial disasters for merchants who lack political protection. Historians still argue whether intense commercial rivalry strengthened medieval economies through innovation and efficiency, or weakened them through wasteful conflict that diverted resources from productive activities. Your daily experience suggests that competition drives technological advancement and customer service improvements, but it also creates enormous costs in terms of security, espionage, and defensive measures that add nothing to the actual value of traded goods. The energy spent fighting commercial wars might otherwise go toward expanding markets and developing new products. Religious differences provide additional weapons in commercial warfare, as Christian merchants accuse Muslim traders of unfair practices, while Muslim competitors question the religious sincerity of Christian rivals who charge interest rates that violate canonical prohibitions. These accusations rarely involve genuine theological concerns, but they can influence political authorities who must balance commercial interests against religious considerations. Your success sometimes depends on portraying competitors as insufficiently pious rather than simply demonstrating superior business practices. Diplomatic immunity becomes a commercial weapon when merchants can claim protection under treaties that shield them from local laws and regulations. Venetian traders accused of commercial fraud can demand trial in Venetian courts under Byzantine law, effectively placing them beyond reach of local justice. This legal protection allows aggressive competitive practices that would result in severe penalties for merchants lacking diplomatic coverage, creating an unfair playing field that grows more tilted each year. The cumulative effect of constant commercial warfare creates a business environment where success requires military-level planning, intelligence gathering, and defensive preparation that diverts enormous resources from productive activities. You spend as much time plotting against competitors as planning legitimate business operations, and your commercial relationships include elements of alliance, espionage, and potential betrayal that would fit comfortably in any military campaign. Victory in medieval commerce requires not just business skill, but survival instincts honed by constant conflict with rivals who view your success as their personal failure. The money changer's scales gleam like instruments of torture in the morning light, and you know that the fair exchange rates he's about to quote will somehow transform your carefully calculated profits into his personal enrichment through mathematical sleight of hand that would impress the most creative thieves. Your leather purse contains a bewildering mixture of currencies from across the known world. Byzantine bezants, Venetian ducats, Arab dinars, and local coins whose purity varies more than the weather, each requiring separate evaluation, testing, and conversion through a process designed to confuse customers while maximizing exchanger profits. The metallic clinks as coins spill across his wooden counter sound like the first notes in a symphony of legalized theft that plays in every commercial district from Constantinople to Cairo. Currency chaos in the medieval Mediterranean reflects political fragmentation that creates dozens of competing monetary systems, each claiming legitimacy while maintaining exchange rates that serve local interests rather than mathematical accuracy. Your morning routine includes memorizing current exchange rates for at least 12 different currencies, understanding weight standards that vary by region, and identifying counterfeit coins that circulate with disturbing frequency among legitimate currency. The complexity would challenge modern computers. Yet medieval merchants must perform these calculations mentally while conducting business in languages they barely speak with people whose honesty remains questionable. Byzantine bezants carry imperial authority backed by centuries of tradition, but their gold content has declined steadily as emperors debase currency to fund military campaigns and lavish court expenses. You've learned to distinguish between older bezants containing pure gold and newer issues that include increasing amounts of silver and base metals. Since accepting debased coins at face value can destroy profit margins that depend on precious metal content rather than nominal denominations. The imperial mint claims consistent standards, but your experience suggests that political necessity trumps monetary integrity when emperors need quick cash for urgent expenses. Venetian ducats represent the emerging standard for international commerce, backed by a republic whose commercial interests align with monetary stability in ways that imperial ambitions often don't. The consistency of Venetian gold content makes ducats preferred currency for large transactions, but their relative scarcity means you often must accept less reliable coins for routine purchases. Venetian monetary policy serves Venetian merchants first and foreign traders second, creating systematic advantages for your competitors who can conduct business in their native currency while you bear the costs of constant conversion. Weight verification requires skills that combine metallurgy, mathematics, and criminal psychology, since determining coin authenticity involves more than simple measurement of precious metal content. Sophisticated counterfeiters produce fake coins with correct weight but inferior metal composition, while crude forgers simply alter legitimate coins by shaving edges or drilling holes that they fill with base metals. Your testing methods include bite tests for gold softness, specific gravity measurements for density verification, and visual inspection for wear patterns that reveal manufacturer methods. Regional variations in coin acceptance create additional complexity for merchants who trade across multiple territories, since currencies that pass without question in one port may be rejected or heavily discounted in neighboring markets. Arab dinars circulate freely in eastern Mediterranean ports, but face suspicion in Christian territories where religious prejudice affects commercial attitudes. Similarly, Byzantine coins carry imperial authority in Orthodox regions, but may be discounted in Catholic areas where political loyalties influence monetary preferences. Money changer guilds operate cartels that fix exchange rates at levels that guarantee substantial profits, while preventing competitive pricing that might benefit merchants and consumers. Your attempts to negotiate better rates encounter polite refusals backed by guild solidarity that makes alternative services impossible to find. The guilds claim their rates reflect market conditions and operational costs, but the consistency of markup percentages across different cities suggests coordinated price fixing that would be illegal if anyone possessed the authority to enforce commercial regulations. Seasonal fluctuations in exchange rates reflect trade patterns, harvest cycles, and military campaigns that affect currency supply and demand in predictable but exploitable patterns. Spring trading season typically strengthens currencies in ports that export agricultural products, while autumn rates favor regions importing grain and preserved foods. Military campaigns drain gold from treasuries while flooding markets with captured precious metals, creating exchange rate volatility that savvy merchants can exploit if they understand the underlying political and economic factors. Credit instruments represent attempts to avoid currency exchange problems through banking innovations that substitute written promises for actual coin transfers. But these solutions create new complications involving bank reliability, authentication methods, and legal enforcement across multiple jurisdictions. Genoese banks issue letters of credit that eliminate the need to transport large amounts of currency, but their terms include exchange rate guarantees that favor the banks rather than merchants. The convenience comes with costs that often exceed traditional money-changing fees. Historians still argue whether medieval currency chaos reflected necessary adaptation to political reality or represented inefficient systems that hindered economic development. But merchants focus on practical survival rather than academic theories. Your daily experience suggests that currency complexity creates opportunities for specialists who understand the system while imposing costs on everyone else who must navigate monetary obstacles to conduct legitimate business. The energy spent on currency management might otherwise support productive activities that benefit everyone. Counterfeiting techniques have evolved into sophisticated criminal enterprises that employ skilled craftsmen, imported materials, and distribution networks spanning multiple countries. The most dangerous counterfeit coins contain correct precious metal content, but bear false mint marks that misrepresent their origin and purity standards. These fakes pass most authentication tests while carrying legal risks for merchants who unknowingly circulate currency that violates imperial regulations or foreign trade agreements. Storage and transportation of multiple currencies require security measures that rival military logistics, since displaying wealth invites theft while concealing assets suggests criminal activity that attracts unwanted official attention. Your money belt contains enough precious metal to ransom a minor nobleman, but carrying such wealth makes you a target for robbers who specialize in merchant victims. The psychological pressure of constant vigilance affects business decisions in ways that purely financial calculations can't capture. Exchange rate speculation offers profit opportunities for merchants with sufficient capital reserves and accurate information about political developments that affect currency values. Your advanced knowledge of military campaigns, harvest failures, or diplomatic negotiations can generate enormous profits through strategic currency positioning, but speculation also exposes you to losses that could destroy years of careful commercial development. The temptation to gamble becomes stronger when legitimate trading margins shrink due to increased competition and political instability. The cumulative effect of currency chaos creates transaction costs that reduce economic efficiency while generating enormous profits for financial intermediaries who add little productive value to actual commerce. Your business calculations must account for exchange losses, authentication costs, security expenses, and conversion delays that can transform profitable trades into marginal ventures. Medieval commerce operates despite its monetary system rather than because of it, requiring merchant skills that include financial expertise worthy of modern banking professionals. The guild meeting hall buzzes with whispered conversations that could determine whether your merchant house prospers or withers in a bankruptcy. And you realize that commercial success in Constantinople depends as much on political maneuvering as profitable trading, with one miscast vote capable of destroying business relationships that took decades to build. Your fellow guild members smile and nod with the practiced insincerity of diplomats, but their eyes calculate how your success might threaten their interests, and every seemingly casual conversation carries undertones of alliance building, threat assessment, and strategic positioning that would make Byzantine court intrigue look refreshingly straightforward. The ornate chamber's golden mosaics remind you that this building has witnessed centuries of commercial conspiracies, and today's proceedings will add another layer to the complex web of obligations, grudges, and mutual dependencies that determine who thrives in Constantinople's merchant community. Constantinople's merchant guilds wield power that rivals government agencies, controlling market access, setting prices, and determining which traders receive the commercial privileges necessary for large-scale success. Your guild membership provides legal protection, insurance benefits, and networking opportunities that independent merchants can't access, but it also subjects you to collective decision-making processes where personal animosities influence business policies. The Guild's charter grants authority over specific trades and territories, creating monopolistic advantages for members while excluding competitors who lack proper political connections. Voting procedures within the Guild follow Byzantine complexity that makes imperial elections seem simple by comparison, with different classes of membership carrying varying levels of influence, proxy arrangements that allow absent members to participate through representatives, and procedural rules that require unanimity for major decisions while allowing simple majorities for routine matters. Your vote theoretically carries equal weight with other full members, but informal power structures based on wealth, family connections, and historical contributions create hierarchies that determine whose opinions actually matter when critical decisions require resolution. Political factions within the Guild reflect broader Constantinople society, with Orthodox traditionalists opposing Catholic sympathizers, military veterans challenging civilian leadership, and established families resisting newcomers who threaten existing power arrangements. Your political alignment affects not just Guild voting, but access to information, business opportunities, and mutual support during commercial crises. Neutrality seems safer than partisanship, but fence-sitting often results in exclusion from both sides when factional conflicts require clear loyalty choices. Economic policies decided by Guild vote can transform profitable trades into losing ventures overnight, as collective decisions about pricing, territory allocation, and trade route assignments affect individual merchant operations in ways that purely market forces never could. Recent Guild votes have established minimum markup requirements that prevent price competition while guaranteeing profits for established traders, created territorial boundaries that assign specific markets to particular members, and imposed quality standards that conveniently exclude foreign competitors while protecting local producers. Disciplinary procedures allow the Guild to impose punishments ranging from fines and temporary suspensions to permanent expulsion that effectively ends commercial careers in Constantinople. Accusations of unfair competition, quality violations, or political disloyalty can result in formal hearings where personal enemies pose as impartial judges, and procedural protections that theoretically ensure fair treatment often prove inadequate when factional politics override legal principles. Your business practices must satisfy not just customer demands and government regulations, but also Guild standards that may reflect personal grudges rather than legitimate commercial concerns. Membership fees and special assessments generate revenue that supports Guild operations while creating financial obligations that constrain smaller merchants during difficult economic periods. The Guild's budget includes payments for political lobbying, legal representation, ceremonial expenses, and charitable activities that enhance the organization's reputation and influence. Special assessments for emergency situations, such as funding diplomatic missions or supporting members facing legal difficulties, require unanimous approval but create financial burdens that fall disproportionately on smaller merchants who can least afford additional expenses. Information sharing within the Guild provides valuable intelligence about market conditions, political developments, and competitor activities, but access to the most sensitive information requires political standing that newcomers and outsiders struggle to achieve. Senior Guild members learn about government policy changes, foreign market opportunities, and potential threats weeks before such information becomes generally available. Your position within Guild information networks determines whether you can exploit emerging opportunities or merely react to developments that competitors have already turned to their advantage. Marriage alliances between Guild families create business partnerships that transcend normal commercial relationships while generating conflicts of interest that can tear the organization apart when family feuds become political disputes. Intermarriage among merchant families strengthens Guild cohesion by creating networks of mutual obligation, but also means that personal disputes can escalate into factional conflicts that paralyze decision-making when business interests conflict with family loyalties. Your marriage choices affect not just personal happiness, but commercial relationships that may last for generations. Historians still argue whether medieval Guild systems promoted economic efficiency through cooperation and standard setting or hindered development through monopolistic practices and resistance to innovation. But merchants care more about practical survival than academic theories. Your experience suggests that guilds provide essential services and protections while also creating obstacles and expenses that independent operators might avoid. The system works well for established members who understand the rules, but presents significant barriers to newcomers and outsiders seeking market access. Religious obligations within the Guild reflect Constantinople's Orthodox Christian identity, while creating potential conflicts for merchants who must deal with Muslim, Jewish, and Catholic trading partners whose religious practices may conflict with guild policies. Guild ceremonies include religious observances that reinforce Christian identity and group solidarity, but business necessities often require cooperation across religious boundaries that challenge official orthodoxy. Your commercial success may depend on maintaining relationships that guild policies theoretically discourage. Charitable activities provide tax benefits and political protection while creating opportunities for members to demonstrate civic responsibility and religious devotion that enhance their commercial reputations. Guild-sponsored charitable projects include funding for churches, hospitals, and educational institutions that benefit the broader community while generating goodwill for guild members. Participation in charitable activities affects your standing within the guild and may influence business opportunities in ways that pure commercial considerations can't measure. Succession planning within guild leadership positions creates opportunities for ambitious merchants while generating conflicts that can destabilize the entire organization when leadership transitions involve disputed elections or factional struggles for control. The guild's future direction depends on leaders whose vision and competence affect all members' commercial prospects, making leadership selection a critical decision that requires balancing personal qualifications against political considerations. Your vote in leadership elections may determine whether the guild adapts successfully to changing conditions or clings to policies that become increasingly obsolete. The cumulative effect of guild membership creates a commercial environment where business success requires political skills that have little direct connection to trading competence, product quality, or customer service. Your time allocation includes substantial effort devoted to guild meetings, political relationship maintenance, and factional maneuvering that might otherwise support productive business activities. Medieval commerce operates within political frameworks that can override market forces, making political competence as important as commercial expertise for long-term success. The Crusader Knight's sword still drips with Saracen blood as he examines your cargo of Damascus steel blades with the calculating interest of a professional warrior who recognizes superior weapons regardless of their origin. And you realize that war creates the most profitable markets for merchants brave enough to sell supplies to both sides while risking execution as traders by either. Your trading post sits precariously between Christian and Muslim armies whose mutual hatred generates enormous demand for weapons, armor, food, and medical supplies that both sides desperately need but refuse to produce for their enemies. The irony tastes bitter as communion wine. You're simultaneously a patriotic Christian businessman and a treasonous arms dealer, depending on which customer discovers your complete client list. Crusade economics operate according to principles that would horrify peacetime moralists, but delight merchants who understand that warfare creates artificial scarcity and desperate demand that can generate profit margins exceeding 1,000% for essential supplies. Christian armies marching toward Jerusalem carry limited supplies and face supply lines that stretch across hundreds of miles of hostile territory, while Muslim defenders must equip forces that often outnumber the available weapons and armor in regional armories. Both sides need what they can't produce locally, creating opportunities for neutral merchants who can navigate the complex logistics of war-zone commerce. Religious justification for trading with infidels requires theological gymnastics that would challenge trained clergy, but necessity and profit provide powerful motivation for creative biblical interpretation. You've developed sophisticated arguments about how selling medical supplies to wounded Muslims demonstrates Christian charity, while providing weapons to crusaders serves God's will in liberating the Holy Land. The logic becomes strained when you're simultaneously arming both sides of the same battle. But war zone ethics operate according to different principles than peacetime morality. Supply route management involves military-level logistics coordination, complicated by the fact that your customers are actively trying to kill each other while you're attempting to serve both groups efficiently. Christian supply lines run through Byzantine territory that remains theoretically neutral, but practically sympathetic to Crusader objectives. while Muslim routes utilize established trading networks that have operated for centuries without European interference. Your caravans must navigate between armies whose scouts report suspicious merchant activity to commanders who view arms dealers as potential spies deserving immediate execution. Weapons trafficking represents the most profitable and dangerous aspect of war zone commerce, since both sides desperately need superior arms while viewing weapons suppliers as legitimate military targets whose elimination would benefit enemy forces. Damascus steel commands premium prices among European knights who recognize its superiority over Western metallurgy. But selling Islamic weapons to Christian warriors raises questions about religious loyalty that could result in heresy charges. Similarly, European crossbows and siege engines fascinate Muslim engineers, but providing advanced military technology to infidels violates several papal prohibitions that carry severe spiritual penalties. Payment methods in war zones require flexibility that peacetime merchants never need, since traditional currency systems collapse when armies commandeer precious metals for military purposes and banking networks disintegrate under political pressure. Christian armies often pay with promises of future compensation backed by papal authority or royal treasury guarantees that may prove worthless if military campaigns fail. Muslim payments sometimes involve capture Christian treasure, creating moral complications about accepting goods stolen from your coreligionists by enemy forces. Information trading generates profits that rival arms dealing while providing strategic intelligence that both sides value more than conventional military supplies. Your merchant network spans multiple territories and military camps, providing access to troop movements, supply shortages, political developments, and strategic planning that commanders desperately need for tactical advantage. The information flows both ways, of course, since maintaining credibility requires providing accurate intelligence to all customers while avoiding obvious bias that would reveal your sympathies. Medical supply trafficking involves fewer legal complications than weapons dealing, but generates enormous profits due to battlefield demand for medicines, surgical instruments, and treatment supplies that save lives regardless of religious affiliation. Christian and Muslim medical traditions utilize different therapeutic approaches, creating opportunities for merchants who understand both systems and can provide appropriate supplies to each side. Wounded soldiers care more about effective treatment than religious purity, making medical supplies politically neutral commodities that both sides accept without theological objections. Food provision represents steady income with lower profit margins, but greater volume than specialized military goods, since armies consume enormous quantities of grain, preserved meat, and other staples that local production can't supply during active military campaigns. Christian armies prefer familiar European foods when available, while Muslim forces require supplies that conform to Islamic dietary restrictions. Your success depends on understanding cultural preferences while maintaining supply relationships that can provide appropriate provisions to dramatically different customer bases. Transportation security requires armed escorts whose religious loyalties remain carefully ambiguous, since Christian guards might refuse to protect shipments destined for Muslim customers, while Islamic escorts could attack caravans serving Crusader armies. Your security arrangements involve mercenaries whose primary loyalty involves payment rather than religious conviction, though even mercenary companies sometimes have political sympathies that affect their reliability when serving particular customers. The security costs often exceed cargo value, but the alternative is total loss to bandits who exploit war zone chaos for personal profit. Historians still argue whether merchant activities during the Crusades represented necessary commerce that supplied essential goods to legitimate customers or constituted treasonous collaboration with enemy forces that prolonged destructive conflicts. Your perspective suggests that war creates demand regardless of merchant participation, and that refusing to supply essential goods simply allows less scrupulous competitors to dominate profitable markets while contributing nothing to conflict resolution. Diplomatic immunity becomes crucial for war zone merchants whose activities might be interpreted as espionage or collaboration, depending on political circumstances and military outcomes. Your trading licenses must satisfy both Christian and Muslim authorities whose legal systems operate according to completely different principles, creating complex obligations that sometimes conflict with each other in ways that require careful legal maneuvering. The documentation proves worthless if military commanders decide that commercial considerations are subordinate to strategic necessities. Moral compromise accumulates gradually as war zone commerce requires increasingly questionable decisions that begin with supplying obviously legitimate goods and progress toward activities that clearly violate peacetime ethical standards. Your first sale of medical supplies to wounded Muslims seemed obviously humanitarian, but subsequent transactions involving weapons, intelligence, and strategic materials have created moral debt that challenges your religious convictions and personal integrity. The cumulative effect of war zone trading creates enormous wealth alongside spiritual costs that may exceed material gains, especially for merchants whose religious faith conflicts with commercial necessities that war zone survival requires. Your success finances comfortable retirement while potentially condemning your soul, creating existential dilemmas that peacetime merchants never face, but that represent the ultimate price of profiting from human conflict and suffering. You lean back in your counting house in Trebizond, watching the morning mist roll off the Black Sea, while your fingers trace the edges of a coded letter that arrived before dawn. The parchment still smells of salt and fear. Your correspondent in Kaffa wrote it while Turkish raiders prowled the harbor. But this isn't just any letter. It's one thread in the vast web of information that keeps you alive in a world where knowledge travels faster than armies, and rumors can bankrupt you before pirates ever board your ships. Your information network spans from the foggy docks of London to the spice markets of Alexandria, held together by an intricate system of trust, gold, and mutual survival. You've spent decades cultivating this network, one careful relationship at a time. There's Marco the Venetian glassblower, who tells you which Genoese families are secretly bankrupt. There's Fatima the silk merchant's wife in Damascus, who knows which caravan routes the Mamluks plan to tax next month. And there's Brother Constantine in the monastery at Mount Athos, who somehow always knows which bishops are about to be reassigned. Crucial intelligence when church politics determine who controls certain trade privileges. The beauty of your network lies not in its size, but in its redundancy. You never rely on a single source because you've learned that informants die, disappear, or worse, get bought by your competitors. That's why you maintain at least 3 independent sources in every major trading city, each unaware of the other's existence. When all 3 report the same rumor about grain shortages in Egypt, you know it's time to corner the Black Sea wheat market. When they contradict each other, you dig deeper, because contradictions often hide the most profitable truths. Your code system would make Byzantine diplomats proud. You've developed a merchant's cipher based on commodity prices and shipping schedules that looks utterly mundane to casual observers. A letter discussing 20 bolts of silk at 15 bezants per bolt might actually be reporting that 20 Turkish ships are planning to raid Sinope in 15 days. You change the code every season, distributing new keys through your most trusted agents during predetermined meetings at specific religious festivals. Historians still argue whether Byzantine merchants had formal intelligence services, but you know the truth. Survival demanded nothing less than your own private spy network. The cost of maintaining this network nearly bankrupts you some years. Good information doesn't come free, and your best sources expect payment in gold, not promises. That young clerk in the Venetian Doge's palace who copies sensitive correspondence for you costs you 50 bezants per month, more than many craftsmen earn in a year. But when his intelligence helps you avoid a Genoese ambush off Crete, potentially saving a cargo worth thousands, the investment proves worthwhile. You've learned to view information as inventory, something to be bought, stored, and sold at the right moment for maximum profit. Your network operates on layers of trust that take years to establish. You begin with small tests, commissioning minor intelligence that you can verify through other channels. Does the informant deliver accurate information on time? Do they ask reasonable questions? Or do they probe for details about your other operations? Can they keep secrets when competitors offer them bribes? Only after months of successful small transactions do you gradually increase their access to more sensitive intelligence. Trust is your most valuable currency, and you spend it as carefully as gold. The emotional toll of this work weighs heavily on your shoulders. You maintain friendships with people you're secretly paying to spy on their neighbors. You smile at dinner parties while mentally cataloging which guests might make useful sources. You've turned information gathering into such a refined art that sometimes you forget where commerce ends and espionage begins. Your wife occasionally jokes that you interrogate the fishmonger about his morning catch not because you're interested in buying fish, but because his boats see which foreign ships enter the harbor before dawn. Geography gives your network its greatest strength and weakness. Byzantine merchants still control enough ports to maintain communication lines across the Mediterranean and Black Sea, but your network fragments whenever political boundaries shift. When the Ottomans capture another Byzantine port, you lose not just trading rights, but crucial intelligence nodes. Your carefully cultivated sources either flee, submit to new masters, or simply disappear. Rebuilding these connections takes years and requires increasingly dangerous clandestine meetings in neutral territories. Modern business executives would recognize your intelligence gathering methods: industrial espionage, competitive analysis, market research. You track your competitors' shipping schedules, financial difficulties, and family problems with the same systematic approach that contemporary corporations monitor their rivals. The only difference is that in your era, getting caught spying might result in a knife blade rather than a lawsuit. You've survived 3 decades in this business partly because you never underestimate how much other merchants would pay to know your secrets, just as you pay handsomely to learn theirs. As evening approaches and new coded messages arrive with the day's final ships, you reflect on how information has become the most valuable commodity you trade. Silk and spices fill your warehouses, but knowledge fills your coffers. In a world where empires rise and fall with alarming frequency, where trade routes shift like Mediterranean currents, and where today's ally becomes tomorrow's enemy, your network of informants represents the closest thing to certainty that any Byzantine merchant can achieve. Tomorrow you'll decode tonight's messages, cross-reference them with reports from other sources, and make the calculated decisions that determine whether your next voyage brings profit or disaster. You stare at the maritime insurance contract in your hands, its elaborate seals and Latin phrases promising protection that you're beginning to suspect exists only on parchment. The document guarantees compensation for cargo lost to pirates, storms, or acts of God. But you've just learned that the Florentine banking house that issued this policy quietly transferred its assets to a cousin's business in Bruges last month, when your spice-laden galley disappeared off Cyprus, taking with it silks worth 3,000 bezants. You discovered that maritime insurance is only as reliable as the men who sign the contracts. And those men, as it turns out, are often more creative with disappearing acts than the pirates who steal your cargo. The insurance industry that's supposed to protect Mediterranean merchants exists in a legal gray area that would make modern attorneys weep. There's no international maritime court to enforce these contracts, no regulatory body to ensure that insurers maintain adequate reserves, and no standardized definitions of what constitutes a valid claim. When disaster strikes, you're entirely dependent on the good faith and financial solvency of whoever sold you the policy. That Genoese banker who seems so trustworthy when collecting your premiums somehow develops convenient amnesia when you arrive demanding compensation for your losses. Your first bitter lesson in insurance fraud came 5 years ago when a consortium of Catalan merchants sold you what they called comprehensive coverage for a grain shipment to Alexandria. The premium seemed reasonable, just 8% of the cargo's value, and the contract included impressive clauses about full restitution and prompt payment. But when Barbary corsairs captured your ships off Sardinia, you discovered that the Catalans had spent your premiums financing other ventures rather than maintaining reserves for claims. Their response to your demands was a shrug and an explanation that market conditions made immediate payment impossible. The fine print, which you should have read more carefully, contained enough loopholes to let an entire Ottoman fleet sail through. You've learned to research your insurers as thoroughly as your trade routes. That charming Venetian who offers attractive premiums might be operating with borrowed capital that could vanish overnight. The Pisan consortium that promises rapid claim settlement might be facing their own financial crisis, using new policy sales to pay old claims in a pyramid scheme that would collapse the moment too many merchants suffered simultaneous losses. Some insurers are simply elaborate confidence games. They collect premiums for months, maintain impressive offices with well-dressed clerks, then disappear with the accumulated funds when major claims arrive. The economics of maritime insurance reflect the harsh realities of 14th century commerce. Insurers calculate that roughly 15% of Mediterranean voyages result in total loss, another 20% suffer partial damage, and a remainder complete successfully. But these statistics mean nothing when insurers lack the capital to honor their mathematical promises. You've watched respected banking houses take insurance premiums from hundreds of merchants, invest the money in speculative ventures, then face bankruptcy when a particularly bad storm season generated more claims than their gambling had earned. Historians still argue whether early maritime insurance represented genuine risk management or elaborate fraud, but your experience suggests the distinction often depends on timing and luck. The legal system offers little protection when insurance disputes arise. Byzantine commercial law provides some remedies, but what happens when your insurer operates from Genoa while your losses occurred in waters claimed by both Phoenician and Mamluk authorities? You can spend years pursuing legal remedies across multiple jurisdictions, accumulating attorney fees that exceed your original losses. Meanwhile, the men who collected your premiums have moved to new cities, established fresh businesses under different names, and begun selling policies to the next generation of hopeful merchants. Some insurers practice more subtle forms of fraud. They honor small claims promptly, building reputations for reliability, while finding creative excuses to deny major losses. Your friend Andreas learned this when pirates sank his wine cargo off Crete. The insurers paid immediately for his lost anchors and rigging, small items totaling 30 bezants, while arguing that the wine barrels didn't qualify for coverage because they were stored in a section of the ship not specifically mentioned in the policy. Such selective enforcement allows fraudulent insurers to maintain facades of legitimacy while avoiding their largest financial obligations. The most sophisticated insurance scams involve networks of merchants, insurers, and even pirates working in coordination. You've heard whispers about arrangements where merchant confederates deliberately sail into known pirate areas, suffer attacks by cooperative raiders, then split the insurance payouts with their supposed victims. Proving such conspiracies requires evidence that participants work hard to conceal, and the profits are substantial enough to buy silence from potential witnesses. When everyone involved in a maritime loss benefits financially accept the insurer, you learn to examine such coincidences with healthy skepticism. Your current approach to maritime insurance reflects hard-won wisdom about human nature and financial reality. You purchase policies only from insurers whose personal wealth exceeds the coverage they're providing, preferably backed by real estate that can't be quickly liquidated or hidden. You spread your risk across multiple smaller policies rather than trusting large coverage amounts to single providers. Most importantly, you've learned to view insurance premiums as a cost of doing business rather than a guarantee of protection. Expecting compensation for losses sets you up for disappointment and potential financial ruin. As you lock the worthless insurance contract in your strongbox alongside similar documents from previous fraudulent claims, You reflect on how the insurance industry mirrors the broader challenges of Byzantine commerce. In a world where written agreements matter less than personal relationships, where legal systems fragment along political boundaries, and where today's partner might be tomorrow's enemy, trust becomes simultaneously your most valuable asset and your greatest vulnerability. The men who promise to protect you from disaster often prove more dangerous than the pirates they claim to defend you against. You watch your nephew Andreas sharpen his dagger in the courtyard below, preparing for what everyone pretends is a routine business meeting with his brother Dmitri. But you know better. The Byzantine merchant families that have dominated trade for generations are tearing themselves apart in succession disputes that make Game of Thrones look like a children's puppet show. What started as a disagreement over who would inherit control of the family's Crimean wheat routes has escalated into a blood feud that threatens to destroy 3 decades of carefully built commercial relationships. Tonight, one of your nephews might not return home. The rot began 2 years ago when your brother Constantine died suddenly, leaving behind a trading empire worth over 50,000 bezants, but it was so ambiguously worded that 3 different interpretations seemed equally valid. Byzantine inheritance law, already complex enough to confuse trained lawyers, becomes completely unworkable when it encounters the practical realities of international commerce. How do you divide shipping contracts that depend on personal relationships? What happens to trade privileges granted to specific individuals when those individuals die? Can partnership agreements with Genoese banks transfer to heirs who've never set foot in Italy? Your family's civil war started with these questions and metastasized into something far more dangerous. Andreas claims that eldest son inheritance customs give him control of the family's Black Sea operations, including the lucrative grain contracts with Kaffa and Trebizond. His interpretation of Constantine's will emphasizes traditional Byzantine family hierarchies that favor male primogeniture. But Dmitri argues that their father's dying words promised him partnership in the Venetian silk trade, backed by relationships that Andreas lacks the diplomatic skills to maintain. Their sister Maria, meanwhile, has hired a canon lawyer who insists that her dowry agreement includes claims to the family's Alexandria spice connections. 3 heirs, 3 interpretations, and enough accumulated resentment to fuel years of litigation or bloodshed. The financial stakes make compromise almost impossible. Your family's trading network generates annual profits that could fund a small army, but it also requires continuous reinvestment and careful management. Ships need maintenance, warehouse rents must be paid, and commercial relationships require constant attention. While the heirs wage their legal and philosophical battles, the business itself begins to deteriorate. Customers grow nervous about dealing with a family embroiled in succession disputes. Competitors spread rumors about the company's stability, using the internal conflict to steal market share and poach valuable clients. You've tried to mediate, but your nephews view neutrality as betrayal. When you suggested dividing the business geographically, Andreas taking the Black Sea routes, Dmitri managing Mediterranean operations, both brothers accused you of favoritism. Andreas claimed that giving Dmitri the more profitable southern routes proved your bias. Dmitri argued that the Black Sea territories had greater long-term potential, suggesting you were secretly supporting his brother. Your attempts at fairness convinced both sides that you were conspiring against them, transforming you from potential mediator into suspected enemy. The violence started with seemingly minor incidents that escalated beyond anyone's control. Andreas hired bodyguards who accidentally intimidated Dmitri's business contacts. Dmitri's supporters began spreading rumors about Andreas's financial competence, damaging his reputation with Genoese bankers. When Andreas's men roughed up one of Dmitri's clerks in a Constantinopolitan tavern, Dmitri retaliated by bribing dock workers to delay loading Andreas's grain shipments. Each escalation felt justified as defensive action, but the cumulative effect was to make the family's business rivals feel like they were dealing with warring criminal gangs rather than respectable merchants. Other merchant families watch your destruction with a mixture of sympathy and opportunism. They understand how succession disputes can destroy commercial dynasties. Similar conflicts have shattered the Canacazinos trading house and nearly bankrupted the Paleologos merchant branch. But they also recognize that your family's internal warfare creates opportunities for their own advancement. While your nephews fight over inheritance rights, competitors are quietly approaching your suppliers, offering better terms and more stable relationships. Your family's clients begin hedging their bets, gradually shifting their business to merchants who aren't threatening to murder each other over contract disputes. The broader Byzantine merchant community suffers from these family wars. International partners, Venetian banks, Genoese trading houses, Mamluk spice dealers lose confidence in Byzantine commercial stability when prominent families publicly self-destruct. Why maintain complex trade agreements with merchants who might kill each other before fulfilling their contracts? Your family's reputation for reliability, built over 3 generations, evaporates in months of bitter infighting. Historians still argue whether family business disputes contributed to Byzantine commercial decline, but you're living proof that internal conflicts can be as destructive as foreign competition. The emotional toll extends beyond the immediate family to everyone connected with your business. Clerks, ship captains, warehouse managers, and dock workers find themselves choosing sides in conflicts they don't fully understand. Long-term employees who served your brother faithfully for decades now face impossible decisions about loyalty and survival. Some quit rather than become collateral damage in a war between their former master's sons. Others try to maintain neutrality, but discover that both sides interpret neutrality as opposition. Your attempts to preserve what remains of the family business require increasingly desperate measures. You've begun secretly moving assets to accounts that neither nephew knows about, hoping to preserve something for the next generation if both brothers destroy each other. You maintain relationships with key suppliers and customers by assuring them that the current unpleasantness is temporary, while privately wondering if your family's commercial empire will survive another year of fraternal warfare. The irony isn't lost on you. Constantine spent his life protecting the business from external threats, only to have his sons tear it apart from within. As you watch Andreas disappear into the Constantinople evening, heading toward what might be his final meeting with Dmitri, you reflect on how quickly 3 generations of commercial success can collapse in a fratricidal chaos. The same family bonds that once provided strength and continuity in an uncertain world now threaten to destroy everything your ancestors built. Tomorrow, you might be planning a funeral instead of a business strategy, and the Byzantine merchant tradition your family represented for decades might die with one of your nephews in a back-alley ambush over inheritance rights that lawyers will still be debating when the Ottoman Empire finally conquers Constantinople. You stand on the walls of Constantinople, watching Turkish siege engines position themselves just beyond bowshot range, and realize that your trading empire is about to become a historical footnote. The Ottoman armies that have been steadily conquering Byzantine territories for decades are now literally at the gates of the last great Byzantine city, and with them comes the end of a commercial system that has dominated Eastern Mediterranean trade for over 1,000 years. Your warehouses still contain silks from China, spices from India, and furs from Russia, but there's nowhere left to sell them safely. The world that made Byzantine merchants essential middlemen is disappearing behind a wall of Turkish steel. The signs of terminal decline have been accumulating for years, but you've been too busy surviving day-to-day crises to fully comprehend their cumulative impact. Byzantine territory now consists of little more than Constantinople itself and a few scattered islands, leaving you without the geographical network that once made your people indispensable to international trade. The Genoese have established direct relationships with Black Sea suppliers, bypassing your family's traditional intermediary role. Venetian merchants sailed directly to Alexandria and Beirut, no longer needing Byzantine connections to access Levantine markets. Your ancestors controlled the bridges between East and West. You're watching those bridges burn. The Ottoman commercial system that's replacing Byzantine trade networks operates on completely different principles. Turkish merchants enjoy state support that makes your independent family businesses look pathetically vulnerable. Where you negotiate each contract individually, relying on personal relationships and centuries-old traditions, Ottoman traders benefit from imperial policies that standardize practices across vast territories. Their tax systems, legal frameworks, and transportation infrastructure are designed to support commerce rather than extract maximum revenue from it. You're being outcompete not just by individual merchants, but by an entire governmental approach that makes trade easier and more profitable. Your financial resources, once impressive by any Mediterranean standard, now seem almost quaint compared to Ottoman commercial capabilities. The Turkish state can provide credit guarantees, military escorts, and diplomatic support that no private Byzantine merchant can match. When Ottoman merchants face pirates, they call on imperial fleets for protection. When they encounter legal disputes, they appeal to courts backed by governmental authority. When they need working capital, they access funding systems connected to conquest profits and tax revenues from territories larger than the entire remaining Byzantine Empire. The psychological impact of imperial collapse affects every aspect of your business operations. Suppliers who once competed for Byzantine contracts now hesitate to commit resources to merchants representing a dying empire. Your Crimean grain contacts express sympathy for your situation while quietly negotiating better terms with Turkish buyers. Mamluk spice dealers in Alexandria still honor old friendships, but they're also establishing relationships with Ottoman merchants who represent the future rather than the past. You're not just losing market share, you're becoming commercially irrelevant. Your attempts to adapt to changing circumstances require compromises that would have horrified your grandfather. You've considered converting to Islam and seeking incorporation into the Ottoman merchant system, abandoning the Orthodox Christian identity that has defined your family for generations. You've explored partnerships with Venetian and Genoese traders, essentially becoming a junior partner in commercial relationships where your ancestors were dominant players. You've even investigated the possibility of relocating your operations to Italian city-states, transforming yourself from a Byzantine merchant into a generic Mediterranean trader. The knowledge and skills that made you successful are becoming obsolete faster than you can acquire new ones. Your expertise in Byzantine commercial law means nothing when most of your potential trading territories operate under Ottoman legal systems. Your relationships with Orthodox monasteries and Greek-speaking communities provide little advantage when commerce increasingly flows through Turkish-controlled ports and markets. Your ability to navigate the complex etiquette of Byzantine imperial courts is useless when those courts no longer exist or wield meaningful power. Historians still argue whether Byzantine commercial decline resulted from external conquest or internal decay. But you know the reality is more complex than either explanation suggests. Your empire's merchants were neither helpless victims nor incompetent failures. They were skilled professionals operating within a system that was being systematically dismantled by larger historical forces. The same geographical advantages that once made Byzantine traders essential middlemen became irrelevant when political boundaries shifted and new commercial networks developed. You're not losing a business competition. You're witnessing the end of an entire economic ecosystem. The human cost of imperial collapse extends far beyond merchant families like yours. Thousands of craftsmen, sailors, clerks, and laborers who depended on Byzantine trade for their livelihoods face uncertain futures. The Greek-speaking communities scattered across the Mediterranean lose their economic connections to each other, beginning centuries of cultural fragmentation. The commercial relationships that once linked Orthodox Christians from Georgia to Sicily are dissolving, replaced by new networks that serve Ottoman interests rather than Byzantine traditions. Your children represent the first generation in over 30 generations that won't inherit a Byzantine trading empire. They're learning Turkish and Arabic instead of perfecting their Greek and Latin. They're studying Ottoman commercial practices rather than mastering the traditional negotiation techniques that served your family for centuries. They understand that their future lies in adaptation rather than preservation, in becoming something new rather than maintaining something old. The transformation is necessary for survival, but it feels like a betrayal of everything your ancestors died to protect. As the Turkish cannons begin their bombardment and the final siege of Constantinople commences, you realize that you're witnessing the end of not just a political entity, but an entire way of life. The Byzantine merchant tradition that survived Arab conquests, crusader invasions, and countless commercial crises is finally succumbing to forces too large and systematic to resist. Tomorrow, you might be an Ottoman subject rather than a Byzantine citizen, and the world that created and sustained your family's commercial success will exist only in memories and historical records. The empire that called itself Roman for over 1,000 years is about to become a historical curiosity, and you're one of the last people who will remember what it was like to be a Byzantine merchant in a Byzantine world. You sit in your study in Trebizond, the last Byzantine port still holding out against Ottoman expansion, carefully copying trade routes and supplier contacts into a leather-bound journal that your grandson will inherit. The ink is expensive, real Byzantine purple mixed with gold leaf, because this document represents the accumulated commercial wisdom of 40 years surviving in an increasingly hostile world. Outside your window, Turkish ships patrol the Black Sea that your family once navigated freely, but inside this room, you're preserving knowledge that took generations to acquire. Your grandson may never use these specific routes or contacts, but the principles you're recording, how to read market conditions, when to trust competitors, which risks are worth taking. These lessons transcend political boundaries and imperial collapses. The young man sitting across from you, carefully noting your explanations of grain market cycles and silk quality assessments, represents both continuity and transformation. He speaks Turkish fluently alongside Greek and Latin, understands Ottoman commercial law as well as Byzantine traditions, and maintains relationships with Muslim merchants that would have seemed impossible to your grandfather. But he also carries your family's commercial instincts, the intuitive understanding of risk and opportunity that can't be taught from books. He's learning to be a merchant in a new world while preserving the essential skills that made Byzantine traders successful for centuries. Your lessons focus less on specific techniques than on fundamental principles that remain constant regardless of political systems. How to evaluate the trustworthiness of potential partners by observing their treatment of subordinates and suppliers. When to cut losses on failing ventures rather than throwing good money after bad investments. Why diversification across multiple markets and commodities provides better protection than concentrating resources in seemingly profitable opportunities. These insights, earned through decades of mistakes and successes, represent your most valuable inheritance, more precious than gold or land because they can't be confiscated by conquering armies. The stories you share with your grandson illustrate truths about human nature that transcend cultural boundaries. The Genoese banker who seemed so trustworthy until his creditors started disappearing. The Venetian captain who saved your cargo from pirates because you'd previously helped his brother escape bankruptcy. The Ottoman official who honored agreements made with Byzantine merchants because his own reputation for reliability brought him more valuable than the short-term profits of betrayal. These anecdotes teach pattern recognition, the ability to identify opportunities and threats before they become obvious to everyone else. You're also passing along the subtle skills that separate successful merchants from mere traders. How to read the underlying emotions in commercial negotiations, recognizing when apparent confidence masks desperation or when seeming disinterest conceals intense desire. When to make concessions that cost you little but provide significant value to partners. building goodwill that pays dividends for decades. Why maintaining multiple exit strategies for every major transaction protects you when political situations change suddenly. These abilities require years to develop and can't be learned from any manual or academic text. The emotional aspects of your legacy prove more challenging to articulate than practical knowledge. How do you explain the loneliness of making decisions that affect dozens of families when you can't fully trust anyone with complete information about your situation? What words capture the burden of maintaining optimism and confidence when you privately suspect that each venture might be your last? How do you prepare someone for the moral compromises that successful commerce requires? Dealing with slave traders because they control certain markets, bribing officials because legal channels don't exist, maintaining friendships with people you're secretly competing against. Your grandson listens to these deeper lessons with the seriousness they deserve, understanding that he's receiving more than business advice. You're teaching him how to maintain personal integrity while operating in systems that reward corruption, how to balance family loyalty with commercial necessity, and how to preserve hope when historical forces seem to make your traditions obsolete. These aren't problems with simple solutions. They're fundamental tensions that every generation of merchants must navigate according to their own circumstances and moral compass. The physical artifacts you're bequeathing tell their own stories about the evolution of Byzantine commerce. The silk samples that illustrate quality differences between Chinese, Persian, and Syrian production. The spice containers that demonstrate how to detect adulterants and assess freshness. The currency scales that reveal the subtle weight variations that separate genuine coins from clever forgeries. Each tool represents knowledge acquired through experience, often costly experience that your descendants can now avoid by learning from your mistakes. Historians still argue whether the Byzantine merchant tradition completely disappeared or evolved into new forms under Ottoman rule. But you know the answer from personal observation. The essential skills survive and adapt, even when the political framework changes dramatically. Your grandson will face challenges you never imagined, but he'll meet them with intellectual tools and ethical principles that connect him to generations of successful traders. The specific techniques of Byzantine commerce may become historical curiosities, but the fundamental approaches to risk assessment, relationship management, and market analysis remain perpetually relevant. The financial legacy you're leaving consists of more than accumulated wealth. It's a network of relationships, reputation, and knowledge that your grandson can build upon. The suppliers who trust your family's word enough to extend credit during difficult periods. The competitors who respect your integrity enough to honor agreements, even when enforcement mechanisms don't exist. The customers who prefer dealing with merchants they've known for decades, rather than strangers offering marginally better terms. These intangible assets often prove more valuable than gold or land because they generate opportunities that money alone cannot purchase. As evening approaches and your lesson draws to a close, you recognize that you're participating in a tradition as old as commerce itself. The transfer of practical wisdom from one generation to the next. Your grandfather taught you to read weather patterns and assess ship conditions. Your father showed you how to negotiate with Mamluk spice dealers and Genoese bankers. Now you're sharing with your grandson the accumulated knowledge of your entire commercial career, adapted to the realities of an Ottoman-dominated world, but rooted in principles that have served your family for centuries. The final entry in your journal acknowledges both endings and beginnings. The Byzantine Empire that created the conditions for your family's commercial success is disappearing into history, but the human needs that drove that success, the desire for luxury goods, the profits from international trade, the benefits of commercial relationships that transcend political boundaries, these remain constant. Your grandson will build his career in a different world than the one that shaped yours, but he'll use tools and insights that connect him to every successful merchant who came before. The empire may be ending, but the tradition continues, transformed but not destroyed by the changing times.